filters for BPA, for air pollution control. But these things are the best, and again, if you need them, you might want to get them. They're not, they're costly. There are also a lot of rules, fire department, OSHA rules about inspection and testing and operating and putting them into commission, but they are really good. Here's a paper. This might be moldy paper. I notice this fancy table. There's a plexiglass hood that comes down. It looks like there's two holes for glove boxes, so you can use, you know, we've probably all seen those nuclear glove boxes, but we have them for biological hazards too. They use them in, say, Wadsworth Lab, where they're dealing with dangerous bacteria and virus, and here for the mold, for you to work on, I don't know, the Dead Sea Scrolls here, or whatever it is. And then they have an elephant trunk exhaust, which is also another great control. We call that local exhaust. It's sucking away the chemicals or the mold particles so that when you're working on something, you're not breathing it. You normally see these in industry for welding, but here it's in a paper lab. This is beautiful. And again, costly, but if you really are serious, this is what you may be building. And so that's kind of state of the art, wouldn't we all agree? You know more than that's does yours look something like this?
Yeah, we have the fume hood that ventilates out. We don't have an elephant trunk. I don't think we have any in the building. You guys don't have one. And that table, I believe, is a suction table.
Yeah,
just so you know.
Where it's, yes, it's sucking again. You can see
it's
the
great
little
for
hose,
solvent
and
removal.
it's sucking, you know, the bad stuff away from that paper. So, and you working in there. But the point is, we're protecting our employees this way. Nobody needs to wear a respirator here, I hope, I would imagine. And that's the point of all this. We prefer these kind of, we call them engineering controls, to handing out respirators like candy, which aren't as effective. The room's going to be contaminated if we don't control these things, certainly with mold. And, oh, that's me. My wife must be calling. I didn't turn it off. I'm sorry. That's bad.
No problem.
All right, sorry about that. I should have been on the airplane. So anyway, that's the ideal. And again, I think that's overkill for many of you in your organizations, but maybe not. Academic and, you know, larger institutions are going to have these kinds of controls. All right, ergonomic hazards. There's a lot of them. I've mentioned them quite a bit. What are they? Sprain and strain, overexertion we call it. Back injuries are all by definition ergonomic hazards. Lifting and hauling books, reshelving, pushing carts. What else would you have in a library? I don't think of other things, but what could they be other than that?
Archival collections that are in
heavy boxes.
Anchor boxes.
Okay, yes, so you're handling boxes, yes. And we know books are heavy and paper is heavy. So we need to be very conscious of how much lifting we're doing. We prefer machinery or assists or aids of some sort rather than people lifting boxes all day. Boxes of paper, I know that copy paper boxes are something like 30, 40 pounds, maybe even 45. So that's real serious lifting. And if you're doing it a lot, you should have, well, you get into forklifts and other assists. You can get all kinds of things are made today. Really nice stuff. Tables that lift up and down. There's a lot of assists you can be using. Did someone have a question?
I was just saying in off-site high-density storage, they use the lifts now.
Good.
Because they're shelving things by size,
Yes.
and they're going up very high.
Yes.
So they have these great lifts.
Are they electrical and they automatic, or do you have to pump them with your foot?
I believe they're electrical. I
Okay.
don't know, but I've been in places that had them, and
The ones I've seen are
electrical. Yeah, you get in, it takes
Yes.
you up, you put
Yes.
the stuff in, you go down, and you can like you see in the concourse and other
I
places.
was gonna say, yes, and there's so many good assists now. They've
Yeah.
really been creative. 10, 20 years ago, maybe not so much, but today with the electrical lifts, you can, we call it manual material handling. There's a lot of ways to assist and get automated equipment, whatever your situation is. But clearly with books, books are heavy, and so there's just a limit to what normal employees should be lifting. Yeah?
I was just gonna say that one of the challenges I've had over my career has been space and supporting staff from these ergonomic problems, but not having the space for these assists in
Yes.
in the processing
aisles.
areas,
Yes.
in the aisles, where we're doing the majority of our lifting.
And that would be a big problem. And those are why I think in my career, certainly chemical hazards where we can install ventilation, it may be expensive, but they're answers. Ergonomics, even if you have lots of money and are willing to go buy this stuff, yes, now we got to totally rebuild all of the stacks in our library so that we can use this stuff. That's much more difficult. And you have to get creative, and there's not good answers, you know, and there's differences between people. One person, and it may not be the person you think, you know, it may be the person who, you know, is really fit and is athletic, they get the back injury rather than the smaller, less fit person that you would have thought is going to get the back injury lifting the books all day. Very unpredictable. That makes ergonomics much more problematic in terms of solving. And I think the best way to deal with it, we're going to talk about this, is people get together and talk about the problems and what ways we can fix it. You all are researchers by nature, so for me, talking to you, it's very different than industrial workers, masons. I do a lot of construction workers. They don't do research. You folks can go very quickly, I think, you're pretty creative, and find all this manual materials handling equipment that's probably now some is specifically designed for libraries and museums. Or it's just designed for handling Amazon warehouse materials and it fits perfectly well in your museum or your library. Point is, there is a lot more out there. So we don't like to pull, we want to push. I thought this was just simple illustrations. These are the kind of principles you want to be teaching everyone, all your employees. And I'll tell you, you know, we can't do it today. We don't have enough time, as much time as we have. We got 50 hazards to talk about. Ergonomics is a training program in itself. And I don't know, you need to do 4 hours with everybody in the library, but 1 or 2 hours just on computer ergonomics. I firmly believe in that. I've taught hundreds of people that. 1 or 2 hours in your career, you should understand some of the principles behind computer ergonomics, because who doesn't work on a computer today? Well, everyone except construction workers. But almost all of us do, and the principles, you're going to learn them and learn them for life. Are you born understanding ergonomics? No. Nobody knows. I don't care how smart you are, what you've done in the world. People have done lots of things. You're not born knowing computer ergonomics, and we have general principles that are going to help you. They don't prevent all injuries, but they're going to prevent a lot of the injuries. I couldn't get this picture very good quality, but what we hate in ergonomics, and it's very risky for shoulders, back, neck, is reaching. I touched the microphone, sorry. Reaching. We don't want to reach up. And the principle is never lift above your own shoulder level. Did I knock it off? Oh, I knocked it off, I'm sorry. It doesn't want to stay on. It must be slippery fabric. Okay, sorry, I didn't even see that. You should have told me. Okay, so we don't want to reach above our shoulder level. And so the idea here is, if you're shelving books, this is bad, and you can see, at least they put the reflective tape on the sky. It says incorrect. Correct would be having the little stool. Now, that's another problem, because I told you falls are a big issue at work, all kinds of work. So now I'm standing on this little stool, maybe my balance isn't that great, maybe I'm distracted, now I fall and I break my hip. So I'm not sure I like this stool. I might like a little rolling ladder, little rolling stair system with handrails, that would be better. But now, what did we just talk about? We have aisles. Can we move these aisles to make it big enough for the rolling little stair system? Probably not. So now we're back to the rolling stool system, but we have to train people, and maybe here's where the alert sign come in. Go slow, don't rush, take your time. Be careful when you're climbing on this stool thing so that you don't reach up. You're able to keep your arms horizontal, and much safer for your back and your shoulders. By the way, your shoulder's a terrible joint. You damage your shoulder, you're in big problems. It's amazing what humans do. Think of, I guess, Simone Biles last week, right? What they can do with their arms, but it's a bad joint. And when you hurt it, now you got real problems, because you can't comb your hair, you can't brush your teeth, you can't do all kinds of things. And it's hard to fix the shoulder joint. It doesn't have a ball and socket like the hip. It's just floating there, so it's super flexible. But boy, do a rotator cuff problem, it's a big problem. And it's painful and debilitating. So we really got to protect this joint, and that's one of the ways you do it. You don't lift above shoulder level. So we teach people these principles, and then we got to say, be careful when you're climbing on that little stool. I want to say stupid little stool. I don't but, you know, again, that's a big risk. But maybe that's all we can fit in the aisle, because, again, our place was built in the 60s, and they had a certain standard, and it's minimal. So we can't get wider equipment in there. That's for the multi-million-dollar renovation when you do that, right? How often is that? That's every 50 years. At least, though, we want to plan when we do the renovation so that we can get the little rolling stairs thing in. And that's the kind of things you've got to be on top of, so that you're talking to the architects when we do the renovation. Oh, we're still doing hazards. I think we're almost done. Physical hazards, heat, cold, noise. I don't think those are major issues for you, but they may be issues for the groundskeepers. Yeah.
I just have a suggestion, talk to the manufacturer to make us narrower stair.
Sure.
Because
And-
if that's what libraries need.
Yes, absolutely.
You know?
You folks know the library equipment manufacturers better than I do. You know, there are certain ones, and you can probably talk to them. They may already have it. Again, their standards, I'm sure, I'm not a library designer, I'm sure there are standards for stacks and so forth. But I'd imagine they've widened over the years. I imagine if you're talking a 1900 library, the stacks are about this far apart. That's just not how we work today.
And some of those really old ones have the ladders that you
Yes.
climb up and then you
Yes.
roll up.
Roll it, you
which
sure.
cannot be safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
And they
No.
have shelving units that are clamped at the basement and go through the floors.
Yes, I've
All the
seen
way
that.
up.
Yes, yes, and they go really high, right. So, again, I thought, you know, if we had museum people here, I know they use x-rays on real, you know, Leonardo's and this stuff, they see the different paint layers. I don't think we have a lot of that stuff here, but again, we have the radium dial.
One thing that we've done at the archives is work with a medical facility to x-ray collections.
Oh,
We did that
right. Or CAT
several years
scans.
ago with some wampum belts.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So, you know, we collaborate with another organization.
Yes, and I know I've heard about that with mummies and
Yeah.
Etsy. They, you know, they sent them to a hospital scanner, and the doctors, I'm sure, were very excited to do this kind of thing. But sure, you work with other people. Vibration? No, it's not a problem in libraries, but maybe for your grounds people, because a chainsaw is a super vibrating tool. Yes.
Have you noticed any radon problems with some of these buildings?
Oh,
Like cities that
radon.
are made with a lot of concrete?
Why didn't I have radon in here? Yes, of course. Radon is a problem for every building on Earth, not just New York, on Earth. It's totally dependent on your location. I know there's one guy in the health department who's Mr. Radon. And you can look up, just look up Radon, New York Health Department. They have the maps. They've done the sampling. So the issue is, people, they have it for residences. I don't know how much they've done it for commercial buildings like libraries. I can tell you, it's really variable. I know in this area, Voorheesville is much worse than Bethlehem, and even in Bethlehem, there are certain streets that are worse. In New York in general, the worst place is the Finger Lakes. At the bottom of each Finger Lake, due to the geology and the glaciers, is the highest levels in the whole state. And it's very location dependent. We would absolutely say that any building should have some idea of their radon level. However, the EPA governs residences and their standard is for 24-hour occupancy. Most of you are employees, and so you have 8-hour occupancy. The OSHA radon level is really high because they're thinking of uranium miners. None of us are uranium miners. But you can use common sense and say, wow, my level in this library is really high. We need to think about mitigating it. There are accepted, simple ways of doing that. Remember, it's coming out of the ground and you can't stop it. But what you do is, if you're building new, you make the slab impervious, or it's an older building, they can push pipes underneath that have a little vacuum on them. They're perforated pipes. You have a small fan sucking, and you suck the radon basically out of the ground before it comes through the foundation and the slab of the building, and vent it up at the roof. And that's how they do it. You could certainly do that. So where do you get the tester? You get it from the DOH, state DOH. I think they charge a little fee now. They used to be free. And you can easily measure your library. You'd want to talk to them about the number of samplers depending on the size. You know, if it was one room this size, which I know some of the smaller town libraries would be one room this size, you could probably just do one. If it's a bigger building and has basements and things, then you might do more. But radon is a real radiation hazard. The EPA says 20,000 Americans die a year from radon, standard lung cancer. So you don't know if there are 3 things that cause lung cancer: radon, smoking, and asbestos. Generally, if you're a non-smoker and not around asbestos, and you get lung cancer, which is not that unusual, it's probably radon at some point in your life. All right, any other questions about radon? That's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up because I didn't remember it. I said radiation, but I wasn't thinking radon, and I should have. Every building on Earth has it. It's higher in the building than outside because it's concentrated. It's outside too, but it's much more doable. Somebody in back?
Carbon monoxide?
Carbon monoxide only comes from combustion equipment. And your combustion equipment, that's your hot water heater, your furnace, those are generally the only 2. They should be vented properly in terms of the chimney that you're not getting carbon monoxide. The only other source would be vehicles outside, and that's background. There's nothing you can do about that. So UAlbany Library right here, it's pretty far from any vehicles, and I wouldn't worry about carbon monoxide. But here it is. If you're concerned, I have a meter I can measure. And I do that routinely. I've never found a problem in a building except an elementary school where 50 diesel buses, or 20 diesel buses were idling outside, and the air was going right down the main corridor, and it was really high in there. And the answer is easy: stop idling the buses or shut the doors. It was difficult because it was a contracted bus service as opposed to A lot of the school districts here, like Bethlehem, Niskayuna, they run their own buses. They can tell the drivers, turn them off. It's easy. Why do you think you have a carbon monoxide problem?
We have a loading dock underneath our.
Oh, okay, that's a good one. I didn't think of it. Yes, but here's the law. New York law says vehicles are not supposed to have their engines running for more than 5 minutes when they're idling. Now, who enforces that?
Yeah.
No one.
Yeah.
However, if it's your own employees running the vehicles, you can have a rule and the top management says you will turn it off and you put a big sign. If it's contractors, you need to come down on them, I guess. First warn them and then come down and say we're going to switch courier service. But you can call the cops. And I think they would respond. It's not like they ever get these calls, but it's the law. And you are not supposed to, it's the state cops could come depending where you
It
are.
would be, yeah,
You
the
know?
Capitol Police.
Yes, the Capitol Police. All right. Or maybe you could call NCON cops too. So newer library safety issues. Let's do this quick and move to the next segment. This is that issue of, and again, I got this, I talked, looking on the internet about libraries, and I know that library in Portland. Actually, he was a tenant of mine, very nice guy. And that was becoming an issue even 10 years ago, the people shooting up in the library bathrooms and in the stacks, in the hidden areas. So newer safety and health issues for libraries. This is awful. I wish we didn't have to talk about it, but it's reality. So intoxicated and drugged patrons, verbal abuse and threatening from the patients, because everybody's got rage problems today and stress and their hair trigger, right? And it's only getting worse. So they can't get their book, I guess, and now they're abusing the library staff. High needs clientele. That again is you're homeless, living in, or not living in the library, spending 8 hours a day in the library, or however long you're open. Isolated areas of the building and restrooms. These are big concern because you can't see them. So now working alone or effectively alone. In other words, you're a smaller county library or town library and your coworkers are at lunch or maybe they're at this conference. You have less staff and you're not a single employee, but there's only one employee at the desk now, and now we have a problem. Active shooter, we all know this, it's horrible, but any place of employment has to worry about wackos coming in the building with guns, and we're not immune no matter who or where we are. Do I worry about this? Is it likely? No. But I think as employers and as public places, you have to give it at least a little thought. And so that's one thing, if you think anything today, is you need to sit with your staff and your coworkers and think, what are the safety and health issues here? I could come up with lots of them. I like these astronomy shows on the Science Channel that I get through FiOS. It's about real astronomy, real science, not the pseudoscience, the UFOs and stuff that they mostly run. But, the universe is a very dangerous place. And could this building today, right now, get hit by a meteor? You bet. Absolutely. Do I worry about it? I hope you don't worry about it. I don't worry about it. Is it impossible? No. So this active shooter, I guess we got to say, boy, this is not, meteor stuff. It's more likely. I think unless you're in a city, big city public library, it's a lot less, but it's not zero. So maybe we should spend 1 or 2 minutes. Same with tornadoes, same with hurricanes. These are real things that happen in New York. Certainly tornadoes do. They're very rare. Should we be aware? Should we talk once in a while about weather disasters? Yes. Floods, you got to think about a lot. Certainly if certain locations. But you should think at least a little about these things. What are you going to do? What is a process? In a medical clinic, we have to think about this. Why? We only have vaccines. Hep B, flu, and that's about it. Do we worry about somebody with a gun coming in looking for drugs? Yes, because they don't know we only have Hep B and flu vaccine. So we don't think a lot, but we sort of talked about it, have an idea. Mostly we're going to call 911, and we know where the exits are. But you should be doing this kind of common sense stuff with your employees. What are reasonable risks? Some of this stuff is. I guess some of the public libraries are now giving out, or they have Narcan available, because they have overdoses in the restrooms. So they're training their librarians. I bet you didn't think you'd get into that when you were becoming a librarian. They're training their librarians in the use of Narcan. Well, it's just a fact, yes.
So at the state library, we've been working on this, and there's information on our webpage.
Okay.
And information about training. Red Cross
Yes.
does the training. Some libraries have opted to do it, some have said not going near it.
Yep.
It's their choice,
Yeah.
but it is available.
And I
it's
think-
legal now. They had to pass a law
Right.
to allow librarians to administer Narcan.
Right, and I guess if they passed a law mentioning librarians, that means it is a problem in these bigger cities.
It's not just the big cities, it's the rural areas.
Oh, rural,
It's
sure.
everywhere.
Sure.
It's not just big cities anymore. It's
Right, well, we
everywhere.
know the highest rates of the opioids is West Virginia and Virginia, so.
Yeah.
So another thing the big city libraries are doing, I guess I read about, and I'm just mentioning here, is they're hiring social workers to be on staff at the library to deal with these patrons. To deal with the patrons. And that's, again, that's something new. So what are some of the things you can do in terms of safety and health in my kind of field? Well, lighting, think about your lighting for your staff, for your patrons, the parking areas. What is the neighborhood? Obviously, crime rates, drug use rates, these kind of homeless rates make a difference, and every place is different. Visual awareness, basically, this is how can you keep tabs on what's going on in the restroom. You know, you can't put cameras in the restroom. I thought that's bad. Our Y, the Bethlehem Y, has had a lot of theft, and some of it was criminal gangs that are operating in the United States. They're not like even New York. They're all over the East. But anyway, they come into Ys. They picked on the Ys, and they go through the lockers, and they go through the cars. So the point is here, and I got ripped off. So I said to the director, why the heck don't you put a camera in the locker room? He said, I don't care. It's a men's locker room. Who cares? Oh, we can't do that. You know, that's impossible these days. I was upset. I'd rather have the camera than my wallet stolen. But anyway, so what can you do? Mirrors, patrols, you know, visual awareness. How do you build it? How do you light it? We all know the back stacks of the library tend to be very dim. And that's maybe something we have to change. Incident reporting. This is encouraging your staff to report any and all verbal abuse and these kinds of incidents. Or they see somebody shooting up and maybe they don't want to deal with it, but they need to report it. Yes?
I was just going to say, some of these things can work against each other.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the first thing I think of in a active shooter incident in our library would be to go to the bathroom because it's a single occupancy door that locks. That is the worst situation for people using drugs,
Yes.
because if somebody locks themselves in there and overdoses, you can't get in
Right.
and assess the situation.
Right. And that's something you need to talk about. I'm not the active shooter or the drug person. I don't know much about this beyond what I read. So I think you have to get the experts in to discuss these things. If it's shooting stuff, it's all police type folks. Yes?
There's a decent website called ready.gov
Yes.
that has a whole page on active shooters that can
Okay.
have some.
Ready.gov, that's mostly natural disasters. And yes, there's huge amount of information out there on these topics. I can say it now because Karen, I work with both of you. Karen got this on my recommendation. I found this. The Canadians are very involved with this social service and drugs in their libraries, and they have a book called Health and Safety Guide for Libraries. Now, the unfortunate thing is it's $15 Canadian, I guess, to
Oh,
read.
actually, if you order the print version, it's $15 Canadian, which is about $12 US. but then they're gonna charge you like $20 to ship it. But for $11.37 on the exchange rate, the day that I did this, you could get the PDF right to your computer, and it says you can download it 5 times. But remember, you save it the first time to your PC, you've got it forever. Now, I'm also the librarian for copyright here at the university libraries, so I'm not recommending that you make lots of prints for your friends. But the way to get around the cost of the book was to download the PDF, and then I don't want to know what you do.
Right, and so I read a short review. I didn't spend the 15 Canadian to download it for this talk, but the point is, there is a lot of stuff out there, not just stuff, and most of it's free, because most of it's from the US government. I'm going to get to that a little, I got to keep moving. So this is one, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, especially if you're a smaller library. All this stuff is out there, and we're going to give you a lot more. Come and look at this, and you can see where to download it from. And this is quite new, or it's like just out. So again, it has a lot of the stress of your own employees. Again, I think of you, this is a pretty low stress job compared to many out there. But again, if you're in a city library and you're dealing with these homeless and drug users, it's not so stressful. It's quite stressful, apparently. All right, so this is another new big issue that's unfortunate. I know it's a big issue over at the New York Health Department. I heard it on NPR this morning, the whole suicide thing, in addition to the opioid drug use. They kind of go together to some extent. But suicide is separate. Librarians have one of the lowest risks of any profession. And there's one profession that's very odd, very high. It has veterinarians. They're really high. Construction workers are the other big group. Farmers, construction workers, loggers. We think that's because they're working in pain. They're getting hurt, they're in pain, they start using these opioids, and then they're addicted. But librarians are in good shape. All right, so now we're getting to the second section. Prevention, protection, risk reduction, I'm calling it. And we'll go, maybe we should take the second break.
Take a 10-minute break now.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, let's go like 5-10 minutes and then take a break. We'll just get into this and then take the break. We're officially done at 12:30. So a few more minutes. We're going to talk about hazard assessment. That's, again, we've talked a lot about hazards already. Different kinds of hazards. Some of you, like the radon and the radiation, have come up with things that I didn't explicitly think about. We're going to talk about compliance, training, and some of your planning, and what I call SOPs. And somebody once got really upset with me for saying SOPs, standard operating procedures, which again, you're going to get from official sources like this, like OSHA. We can have SOPs for lots of things. HAZCOM, hazard communication, dealing with abusive patrons. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's lots of guidance out there. All right, so assessments. I think you want to talk to your employees, all of your employees, the interns, the high school kids who are shelving books, the people that are actually doing things. What are your concerns? Are you dealing with abusive patients? Do you worry about the restroom security and the drug use? And what can we do about the locks on the doors? Your workers know more than anybody about the issues in your building. And again, if you have groundskeepers and janitors, you got to talk to them. You can hire people like me or some of the archive people or other experienced conservators. You can hire other consultants that can come in. They're great because they're another set of eyes. Do you want them every month? Heck no. But once in a blue moon, yes, because maybe they see things or think about things you don't think about. And I am going to tell you, you don't need to pay somebody. There's free sources, and here's what they are. Number one is your workers' comp carrier. If you're, I know Syracuse and Union and RPI are here. You're paying workers' comp insurance a lot. That carrier should be responding to you and giving you help. And they have professionals, kind of like me, that should be coming through for free and helping you. And, you know, again, they're not gonna come every month, but if you ask them every 5, 10 years to come through and look, they should be happy to help you as risk management to help you reduce your rates. Here's another one. Whether you're public or private or nonprofit, OSHA is paying for consultants who can come for free and do this for you and follow every OSHA rule. And you can access them in this state, whether you're public or private, through the New York Department of Labor. And they're called the OSHA consultants. And they come for free. They will do expensive sampling, like for asbestos or lead, if you think you have a problem there. And they don't charge a penny. Now, a lot of people don't want OSHA in their building, but it isn't OSHA, it's Department of Labor. These people are basically separate from OSHA, but they make you sign an agreement with them that if they find OSHA violations, you need to fix them. Well, that's reasonable. And in the library, I wouldn't worry much. Some of the industrial companies don't want them because they might have to spend $100,000 right off the bat to fix these things. But these consultants are very good. Everyone I've known who's used them is happy. People don't know they're out there. Well, that's not true because usually there's a waiting list to get them in. It may take months. But they are very good, and I recommend, and they're free. Checklists, books, articles, you folks know how to research. There's huge amounts on the web and available to you. You have your professional organizations, and you have, yes.
So when I worked for Columbia University, and we had the OSHA folks come through.
Yes, good.
And they were actually very helpful.
Good.
Because they give you solutions at the same time.
Great.
So it was like a lot of things like tape, marking steps, pathways, telling you needed more space. It was just really practical space things in the library that staff appreciated. It wasn't seen as a punishment or something,
right.
you know.
You shouldn't see it as a punishment.
Yeah, they were actually very, very helpful, and they had solutions. So, and they were low-cost solutions for us in the library.
Right.
So it worked out very well, and they came more, you could have them request them. I don't know if they work for the university or the city, I don't know who they work for, but.
No, in New York, if it's the group I'm thinking of, it's New York Department of Labor.
Maybe that was it, yeah.
They happen to have, I think it's the same people, but it's 2 programs.
Yeah.
They go back and forth. One is for public, that would be SUNY. Are there other public, and the libraries and archives? They're public. SUNY is part of the public system. Everybody else in the room, who's Columbia, our people, all the universities, your nonprofits, you are the OSHA side, federal OSHA, and that is still the same New York Department of Labor group. And again, you can just go, you folks research the blue pages, New York Department of Labor, call the number and say you want the OSHA consulting group. They'll get you right there. There are not that many of them, and they do have a waiting list generally. So when you said tape, do you mean tape on the floor for places you can trip?
Yes, so stairs, because we had a dark room.
Yes.
We had chemicals for the photography.
Yes.
But it's an old building, there were a lot of stairs in place, just one step down.
So they're worried about slips, trips, falls, as I said, because that one step that somebody trips on because they don't see it, that's a broken hip or something serious. It can be very serious. And yes, a little reflective tape that sticks to that step. I like that. Another thing I like is around every electrical panel, OSHA says you need 3 feet of clear space. So you put striping, yellow striping on the floor, whether it's sticky or paint, with a spray can and a template. These are common sense things that you don't know, but that we do. Again, I can't give you every OSHA rule. Here it is, we brought this show and tell. Here's the OSHA rules that apply to you, and it's fine print. These are the 2 volumes that apply to you all. There's another volume that's thicker than this one for construction only. I can't go through every rule in here. This is but it's all on the web in full text. You can find things, which you can't find them in here, I can. It's really hard to read Federal Register format, if anybody's tried to read the Code of Federal Regulations. This is one little volume of, there's huge numbers of these rules. That's OSHA. So yes, they're very helpful, or again, I would start with them and your insurance company. They're both free, or they should be free. So here's what we're trying to do. Identify the hazards, assess how bad they are. Do we think about tornadoes here? Yes, you should think about tornadoes. Is it something you spend a lot of time worrying about? No. We common sense, stay away from the windows. If the weather looks bad, turn the weather radio on and move to the basement or inside the building away from the window. There's not much more we need. But is it worth doing that once a year or once every 2 years with your employees? Sure. And you move on to the next thing you're going to talk about. Slips, trips, falls, racking books, you're going to spend more time thinking about, right? And talking about. So we're assessing. Controlling, maybe it's paint, maybe it's training, maybe it's a ventilation equipment, that depends, and that could be money that you need to spend, we don't know. Monitor, you're going to assess what you did and make sure it's, as people move on and, turn over. Time, people forget, oh, it was a big issue to deal with the asbestos in 1999, but it's been 20 years, we've forgotten about it. We need to reassess what's going on. It's still in the building, but what have we done about it? What are we thinking about? And now we're going to do a renovation, so we really better think about the asbestos again. So we have to keep assessing or monitoring things. So I want, I've said it a few times already, everybody should be involved. That's the key point. We need to sit down, spend some time. Yes, we're not working, we're talking about health and safety, but we need to think about some of these things. What are the tasks that people do? What are the contractors doing? What will the contractors be doing if we're doing renovation and construction? That's where you want to know, when are they jackhammering? When are they welding? When are they painting? When are they doing the asphalt roofing? If you don't tell your employees that these things are going to be happening, you're going to have very upset people with low morale. If you know, okay, January 1st, they're coming in, they're going to do 8 hours of jackhammering below us during our work period. People can deal with that generally, or they can take a vacation day, but boy, don't surprise them with that. So that's where you really want to talk to contractors about schedules and who's doing what when, inform your own people. I do a lot of work on this construction stuff with state people through the unions, and it's really a big deal because, construction is not what most of you are used to. I work with the construction workers, they're not fazed by it, but office workers are. What are your security issues? What are your ergonomic problems? Oh, what I meant here is, I think the security, for most of us, a lot of this is risk and probability. It's harder to deal with. I can deal with the lead and the asbestos. I know the rules, this and that. How do we assess our patrons? Well, you can't. You don't really know. So you kind of have to do some common sense stuff and do that everybody else is doing, get advice from experts, and hope that, when it happens, you're prepared. And it probably will never happen. Ergonomics is something I know better, and that is difficult. There are no answers, or there are often, how can I say it? There are often no obvious answers, partly because we don't know the individuals, right? I told you, we can't assess who's at risk, really, and it may not be the person you think. The big, strong, athletic person may have worse back issues than the person who looks out of shape but never gets hurt. We have space issues. We have just practical issues that prevent us from getting newer ideas like mechanical lifts and so forth. So that's something we need to work on and always be thinking about, ergonomics. A lot of it is technique and training, and people forget. They don't have it on their minds all the time because they're people. So that gets hard. Conflicting goals, well, that was, you want your library accessible to patrons, but on the other hand, now you gotta be watching them and making sure they're not, stealing books or shooting up or whatever they're doing. So that's kind of conflicting goal. Cost, and people have habits, I've always done it this way, I'm not gonna change. That's with typing. I try to tell people you should always have your wrist straight when you're typing, because that's carpal tunnel. But if someone's used to typing like this, it's hard to retrain them. They're not going to be efficient for a week or two when they try to change their position. And, once they've been typing a certain way for a long time, it's very hard to get them to change. Sometimes you tell them, look, it's going to feel weird for a week or two. And then they say, oh, this is so much better. Why didn't I do this? Well, because you weren't trained. So, again, habits. Careful planning of non-routine. This is, again, our construction. We really need to plan before and during, maybe even after. We need to think about flooding and other disasters. That's the tornadoes. Again, it depends on your location and your history and some of these things. Can everybody have a flood from these overhead pipes and roofs that we've talked about some here? You bet. You better be thinking about that in the library or archives. And what can you do? Well, we were saying, hopefully everybody knows you better have a closet full of tarps. And you know what? When they get 20 years old, at least those darn tarps I buy at Home Depot and those places, they're cheap plastic and they're no good. So you're going to have to throw them out and buy new ones. By the way, that's the same with, where are they? I had some, these gloves. I have sample gloves. These ones are yellowed and old because they've been sitting around as examples. They're no good anymore. So I have to throw them out. That's time happens. And it may be decades, it may be 10 or 20 years, but at some point you're going to have to buy new ones because you want to be able to put the tarps over the books in case that plumbing line breaks. And that's just fact, it happens. So we need to plan. When you've done a risk assessment, you prioritize. And again, I'm going to say don't worry about meteors, right? That's common sense. And maybe don't worry about some of these other things. If you are on a hill, you don't have to worry about a flood from a river. You still may need to worry about the flood from the sprinkler pipe, but not from a river. What's most pressing? And you better comply with regulations. Okay, OSHA told you, or I told you, you're not complying with OSHA here. You have an electrical panel with mop buckets and ladders and everything right all around it. Well, that's an easy one to fix, but maybe some are harder. You've got to comply with your OSHA regulation. So you need to be aware of it. Employee involvement. They can help prioritize, develop to-do lists. That's the way humans work, right? We need to have a checklist and go down and do the easy and the cheaper and simpler stuff first, and then tackle the more difficult stuff. So I've said it a lot, but here it is explicitly. Who regulates this? Well, the laws are clear. So federal OSHA, that's all your nonprofits, all the universities except SUNY. Any SUNY is PESH. Everyone else is federal OSHA. They have an office in Albany. That's the only office. It's actually on 155. I think officially, is it Guilderland? I don't even know. It's off Central Avenue, 155. It's Colony, excuse me, Colony. But they're all. And they cover this entire region from, I think, Westchester to the Canadian border. Is it likely you'll see them? No. New York has a different office. Is it likely? No. But if somebody falls off your roof, they're going to be on your site. And I hope that doesn't happen. They'll be on your site in minutes. They're out there. So all of the rules apply to you just as to a manufacturing site. They don't discriminate in that sense between a university or a library or anyone else. Now again, they're not routinely inspecting libraries because there's no reason to. They better not be. They should concentrate on the high-risk areas. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be complying. So record keeping and all these specific rules. That's their symbol. They have a very good website. that explains a lot of stuff. I'm going to talk about it later. The only problem is I call 1,000,000-page websites. I think you know what I mean. So OSHA has a 1,000,000-page website where it's insanely large. It's hard to find things. But that's your profession. I hope you're better off than the construction foreman or small company owners that I talk about with this. You know, to find things isn't easy on their website. Something. And then there's another organization I'll get to. So here it is. So I said the public is PESH, that's New York Department of Labor, Public Employee Safety and Health. They would come in here to this site. They have nearly the same, and a lot of them are identical word for word, and they say, go to look at the OSHA codes. But PESH does have some specific, New York specific things that apply to the public entities. Public entity would include, I think, the Bethlehem Public Library. I think those are public employees. I'm pretty sure they are covered by PESH, not federal OSHA. Again, RPI, union, you're covered by federal OSHA. Public libraries are going to be covered by PESH. You have to have injury logs if you have more than 10 employees. You have to have hazard communication about the chemicals. I mentioned that, yes.
Not all public libraries are the same.
No.
So if you're an association library, you would not.
Oh, okay, nonprofit association, that's right.
They're all not-for-profit.
Yes.
They're all managed by their board. They're not
Yes.
a part of the municipality in any way.
Okay, but here's how they define it. It
Yeah.
depends who's giving you comp insurance, and I have no idea. If it's comp insurance through, well,
They might,
through a public entity, but that's how they define it. And
Right.
again, I don't know
yeah,
for sure.
but not
But-
all of them would be.
You can call
Yeah.
these various offices, and I'd say, you know, just follow the OSHA rules and you're covered by PESH. Because the only thing that's actually a little different with PESH is the chemical, the amount of chemicals you can have in the air, and those are more industrial or construction. You don't have a lot of silica and carbon monoxide in the air in the library. And those are a little stricter for PESH. In addition, they are a little stricter on the chemical hazard communication for like the janitors and the groundskeepers. But I don't think that's a worry for you. It's so subtle, it's not going to affect you. All right, these are minimums. You can go beyond. For instance, OSHA says and PESH says you will have a minimal first aid kit. And believe me, it's really minimal. It's like 2 Band-Aids and 2 gauze pads. I would hope any public library and any school library, because schools are big, they have a lot of, you know, even a high school library has 1,000 students that might come in, you'd have a bigger first aid kit than the minimum OSHA. AED, they don't require it, you should probably have it in most public libraries. So there may be local laws too about those things. How do you go about complying? Well, awareness of all these regulations. And I told you, I'm giving you 4 hours here about lots of topics. I can't give you the many details. You can look at the OSHA website, and I'm going to give you some things that they can help you with. You can have your insurance company, private consultants, workers' comp, state DOL, act promptly. Compliance. So understand, what are your written requirements? One of them is the chemical hazard communication. Another is injury and illness logs if you have more than 10 employees. You need to have, if you have an eye wash, which might be in the furnace room for those boiler chemicals I mentioned, you need to have a written record of it's really supposed to be every week, but I think 2 weeks is fine, of flushing it. Somebody's supposed to sign it. Once a month, somebody's supposed to sign on the tag on the fire extinguisher. These are written records that, is OSHA going to make a big deal about this? No, but it is the law. You're supposed to be doing it. And I'm going to always tell you, you should be complying with the law. So those are written things. More is the training. What do we say about hazards? Eliminate them if you can. What's an example? Well, we all used to use mercury thermometers. High schools, homes, nobody uses mercury, I hope, anymore. You use red alcohol. Red alcohol is much less of a hazard. So we've eliminated that hazard. And by the way, you recycle the mercury thermometers, through your hazardous waste collection. Don't throw it in the garbage. Engineering out. Engineering classically is the controls I showed you at that Indiana paper library, where you have exhaust ventilation. That's engineering controls. Or guards around machinery, or other things that prevent people from being exposed. Administrative controls, we use them all the time. The two major ones are training. Don't we use training? Don't you think training is useful? Sure we do, all the time for all kinds of things. That's a control along with rules. You will not eat in the area where we have the arsenic treated collections, period. End of story. No eating and drinking. That's very common. And finally, PPE. Well, everybody always talks about PPE, personal protective equipment like respirators and gloves. We'll talk a little, not much. That's a big topic too. So here this is our credo, hierarchy of controls. I don't know if you can see it. Elimination, substitution, implementing control, engineering controls, administrative, least effective, least recommended are, but can we wear gloves? Should we wear gloves when we're handling these moldy collections or arsenic-filled bird collections? Of course. And is there a substitute for that? Probably not. So we use PPE a lot because there's no substitute. Even though it's not effective. Why isn't it effective? Why? Because you forgot to wear them. That's human. Or you wore the wrong type. Or you didn't wear it properly. Those are the big issues. Gloves. Be careful with gloves. I do want to talk a little, because that is something you might wear for mold or for arsenic. There are many, many types. And the ones on the right we call utility gloves. Those are better for your janitors, mixing chemicals, like more concentrates, very dangerous things like mercury. The ones on the left, exam gloves, are more for less exposure, less hazardous. Be aware, they come in every color, and there are many different materials you make these out of. Nitrile, neoprene, butyl, PVC, natural rubber latex. They're all different. They have different characteristics, and for something like mercury, you better have the right glove. Well, you need to look that up. There's lots of tables on the web, and the major glove manufacturers have compatibility charts for the different chemicals and the different materials. Can any of us tell which materials these gloves are made of by the color or the feel? No, no, you have to look at the box and what you ordered. I am not a glove salesperson. I can't tell one material from another, and the color is irrelevant. They come in every color. That's irrelevant. In general, you want to use nitrile exam gloves. They're more impervious to most chemicals. They're cut resistant. You never ever want to use natural rubber latex. Anybody know why?
Allergies.
Yes, if you wear them a lot, you can get a nasty rubber allergy. Why? Because they're natural from a sap. They have protein in them from the tree. That tree protein can cause an allergy, and it can be severe, and rubber is everywhere. It's in pens, it's in your underwear. We've had a few patients that have had severe rubber allergy. It's not pretty. You're really, and you can get asthma from that, asthma, which is now you can't breathe because of your underwear, and you can't avoid that rubber band in the underwear. It's usually natural rubber, but it substitutes with these artificial rubbers made from petroleum, and you never know. It's a blend sometimes. It depends on the price of oil and the price of rubber. So you never quite know what you're getting. So don't use the nitrile exam gloves. They're the most common. Boy, I keep getting caught on this thing. All right. Eye protection. This is for corrosive type chemicals. Maybe your janitors, maybe some weird things you're doing. Just be aware. We use safety glasses more for particles. Like I'm doing carpentry work. But for liquid chemicals, you want to have either the visor, we call it a face shield, or the chemical goggles. And again, sometimes you are using strong chemicals, you need to protect people's eyes. If you use them regularly, you also need an eye wash. That would be like in the furnace room where you have the boiler treatment compound. And that eye wash, there's a lot of rules. How it's set up, the flow, the inspection. Again, there's your OSHA rules, you can look them up. Respirators, a big subject. I only want to talk about this type, these are the ones that are heavily regulated. And Maria has faux archivists who might go to the bad mold situations, mostly it's for mold, and they have actually gotten medically cleared by a doctor and then a fit test to wear these. You must have a whole bunch of things. You must also have a written plan, according to OSHA and PESH, to ever wear these at work. These are not as heavily regulated. And notice, again, lots of colors and styles. They're all different, but they're all the same. They're called a filter and face piece, also called a respirator. So we got to designate them. These are called N95s. Some of them, there's some other designations. N95, that's a technical thing for OSHA. I've lost the straps on this one. But anyway, you can hand these out for, say, moderate mold protection without having lots and lots of bureaucratic stuff like medical exams under 2 conditions. The levels aren't too high, they're not above any OSHA levels, and that you've done a basic instruction of your employees. It happens to be Appendix D of the respiratory code you've given to your employees about the use of these things. You follow that? So you can hand these out for general use if you do those 2 things. Select them appropriately, make sure the levels aren't above an OSHA requirement or OSHA level, a speed limit, which probably they're not. And we don't have a speed limit for mold, by the way.
But there is a different speed limit, right? Is the 10 square feet?
No, that's EPA, and that's
EPA.
for cleanup. That's not
Okay.
for respirators.
Okay,
That's a recommendation. It's not OSHA.
okay.
Yeah.
John?
Yes.
I've noticed that, if I go to Lowe's to buy an N95 or a package of them, there are lots of different kinds.
Yes.
How do we know which one to get?
Well, I haven't mentioned NIOSH, and I should have. NIOSH is the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. I was hoping we could go to their website later when we're done. I gotta go a little faster. They regulate the respirators, and they have this complicated system that, again, I just don't have time to go into today with these designations, NRP, and then 95, 99, and 100. And the idea is it tells you the type of protection the mask gives you. Mostly you're using N95s. And N95s have 2 characteristics. Number 1, they have to have a NIOSH approval number, which on this one it says NIOSH P100. It has the approval on the box. It isn't printed here. It's a reputable manufacturer, this one. And you can tell if it's NIOSH approved. One way is 2 straps. If it only has 1 rubber band strap, it is not NIOSH approved. And this one, you see the 2, all of the ones I have the 2, and that's one way you tell it's approved. But there are 50 or 100 manufacturers. I would only use a NIOSH approved one, and they're all going to say, you can come up and look at this, NIOSH N95. National Institute, and they have a 1 million-page website with information about every hazard under the book. All the hazards we've talked about. Slips, trips, falls, electrical, arsenic, on and on and on and on. So the rules, here it is. I always get a little ahead of myself. So the voluntary use of N95s, which is what's relevant here, without medical clearance, without written plans, selected properly, meaning you use a particulate respirator for mold. which is what the N95s are. You don't use an organic vapor respirator. That would be inappropriate, or a pesticide respirator. And you make them read, you get it off the web, you can go, again, it's the Code of Federal Regulations. 1910 is OSHA, and 134 is respirators. So you just punch that in, now you have the reference at the OSHA website, and you print out Appendix D, which is about 2 paragraphs. But your employee is supposed to read that. And it's good for dust and mold, but not for asbestos. And not, I wouldn't use it for lead either. If anybody's dealing with lead, they should have at least this type of respirator. Okay? Training. So we got to do some training on health and safety, similar to what we're doing here, maybe a little more focused, obviously much shorter in general. And how do you do it? Well, I would say when you have your regular meetings, you have a topic and you talk about chemical hazards and the HAZCOM rule, the 5 elements we talked about that you're going to have at your site. You talk about slips, trips, falls one day, and especially trips and slips, because you don't tend to go on roofs. You're not building buildings and doing that stuff. Anyone who works with ladders, though, you probably want to do some ladder training. And that's, again, something you can get from OSHA or your workers' comp carrier. You can get things off the web. There's lots of good PowerPoint trainings in any of these health and safety topics. All you do is go to YouTube or you Google ladder training PPT. Or fire training, emergency evacuation training. I'm going to show you that one. Because emergency evacuation for fire, everyone should do that at every place of employment. And OSHA says it's a rule. You will do it. I don't think most people do. PPE, if you're using it, you need to train people at least minimally in how to use these things. I told you the Appendix D, appropriate. How do we use them? Why do we use them? When do we replace them? These kind of common sense stuff. Is it hours and hours? No. But are there a lot of topics? Yes. So you have to have a systematic plan. Done over time, regulated staff meetings. Individually, I mean, when you're hiring people, you should have some standard procedure and standard topics you go over with your new hires. Every employer has that, but it certainly should include safety and health, even for a desk librarian. Maybe that's computer ergonomics, at least a few minutes, or watch this training video that you can get from OSHA on the web, and so forth. Lots is available. National Safety Council, this is for things like the first aider. You have to have some trained first aid people on site. You get that through Red Cross or National Safety. OSHA, so here we go with OSHA. Hopefully we'll get to see this, but go to their homepage and look up employer and then training. They don't have they have an employee section, but it's more your rights. By the way, you should be training people on their OSHA rights too. I think you should. OSHA requires you have the poster up, we all know that. They have something called e-tools and expert advisors. And by the way, the expert advisor they have for employers, you can go through your building, how you heat it, all these details, and they'll tell you what rules come up. So there, right on the web, is one way to start dealing with OSHA rules. Recommended practices. They have stuff about computer ergonomics. That's very good. They have stuff about evacuating your building. What do you tell people? What are the circumstances? How do you train them? So forth. This expert advisor hazard awareness program. You can find it in their website. You answer questions about your facility and they'll tell you things about what you need to do. They also have a lot about floods and disaster response. And for people like archives who go out and respond to floods, they have a lot of information about that. So here's NIOSH, CDC, National Institute of Occupational Health, lots of stuff. if you want to deal with, say, bloodborne pathogens, which I think you have to. Why? Because people bleed in your facility. Somebody has to be first aid trained, they have to have the gloves, they have to have some minimal training in how to deal with, I don't know, the patron. I'm worried about cutting my waist right here. There is a very sharp metal thing on this little computer keyboard thing, and I know I'm gonna either rip my pants or get cut from it if I'm not careful here. It's a fact, you know, this stuff exists, and it's not ideal, but, you know, if there's blood, you need to deal with it properly. Here's some of your professional associations: National Park Service, Curatorial. The truth is, Karen found this. I found a reference to it. I couldn't find it on the web, and I don't know what I was doing wrong, but you folks are professionals. I would come to you for this. I think it's there, right, Karen? Did you?
Found it. There's a copy of it on the table.
Yes,
If
I
people-
couldn't print it out. I wanted to.
So you can have a look at it. It's really comprehensive and very good.
Good. So again, there's a ton of stuff out there, and who's more aware of this stuff than like the Smithsonian and the National Park Service? How many square feet, how many thousands of cubic feet of collections do they have? Yes, they have some real experts. The Library of Congress, I tried to look them up just out of curiosity. I couldn't find anything. And the problem was, which may be, that you need to be an employee to get into some of the health and safety stuff. That is not unusual. I bet Columbia University has a very extensive health and safety, but I don't know if you could get into it as an outsider.
Now, a lot of these places, because it bumps up against security.
Yes, yes.
So,
But anyway, here's another one, American Library Association. I would think they would have a lot of stuff. I couldn't get in. I don't know if you have to be a member or how that works, but that's your thing. So I would hope they would have reference material for you, so forth. Here are some more. My association, so now we're getting into the professional health and safety. There's quite a bit. AIHA, American Industrial Hygiene Association. You can Google Synergist Curatorial Health and Safety. That was some, I think she worked at Smithsonian. So they had an industrial hygienist like me that worked at the Smithsonian, and she wrote a nice article in this magazine called The Synergist, our magazine, that you can look up, and they updated it. And I looked it up to do this talk, right? Another one is the ASSP, American Society of Safety Professionals. I told you we're split between health and safety. They have a lot of the violence standards and how to, you know, this kind of thing. And some of this is open to the public. And then your other two professional organizations that I learned about from the article, American Institute of Conservation and the SAA, for some of you. And then this document that Karen bought, it's really great, it's on the table here, come and look at it in a minute. We'll take a break. Okay.